right, hello and good morning or good evening to wherever you are. Welcome to Restless, the podcast. This is our inaugural episode, our number 1. I am your co-host Luke, and with me...
Hey, and I'm Steve, and welcome to Restless, the podcast. You know, we would love to hear from you, and the way you can contact us is to email us at info@restlesspodcast.com, or better yet, go to our website, restlesspodcast.com, and go to the section that says Tell Your Story. We believe it's in the power of stories from each other that provides for healing and hope for the future.
You know, as I was thinking about just what this is all about, what Restless, the podcast, is going to be all about, I thought about something said by Augustine of Hippo. You might know him as St. Augustine. He said this, crying out to God, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they can find rest in you." And whenever I think about that, I just realize that it seems like we're in a constant state of restlessness, and we try to fulfill it by any various means, but we will never truly find rest until we acknowledge that it can only come in the one who made us. Therefore, this name, Restless, is from those who are going to tell their story of exactly that to bring hope and healing to others.
And our first guest of this inaugural show, Jered, his whole story, I think, defines restlessness. So it's our hope that you would sit in and listen, because I think somewhere in there you're going to hear your own story, or at least a piece of it.
Jered's story is that of a young man who basically felt abandoned by his family as he was dropped off at schools for perceived behavioral issues and just drugged up. And going into adulthood, Jered drugged himself as he just struggled with the restlessness of what that all meant and the pain that it left him with. This is his story, and we hope that in his story, you'll hear much of yours. We want to welcome our friend Jered onto the show, and Jered, it's all you, man.
All right, so I guess I'll start with one of my earliest or first memories. I was going to a school. It was in a church.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I guess I start there is to just, I guess, lay the landscape for my life always being a part of church. I've always been in church. I've always gone to church. My parents have always kind of seen to that. But I think it was when the Challenger exploded. Isn't that the one that went up in Challenger?
Mm.
And I remember I went to the bathroom, came back, and they had the TV pulled in that time, and were watching it come down in pieces. And that was 5th grade. And I've been told I should have more memories prior to that. So I don't know if I've, suppressed them or what. But I guess one of the biggest things that I guess I look back on my life and feel like were a big problem was a lack of discipline. My mom and dad divorced when I was 3, and my mom remarried a man that she had met while my dad was at officer candidate school, and they remarried, and they lived in Georgia at the time, and then we moved to Maryland, and she wouldn't allow my stepdad to discipline me. You know, when I did anything wrong, my mom wouldn't let him spank me or, virtually any kind of consequence for anything I did. So, I feel like it was only natural for, someone that doesn't have consequences for poor choices just to, not really think about their choices and just go with whatever feels right, feels good at the time. And it caused me a lot of problems in school because if I didn't like a teacher or what the teacher said, I didn't do it. And there was times where I ran away from school in elementary school and suspended from school. I think I went to close to maybe 17, 18 different schools, between middle school and high school. Secondary schools, behavioral schools, was put in some of those. And then one summer, as the summer was ending, we went out for some school supplies and went to the movies in Westminster. And it was a late movie, and we got out, and it was close to 11 or midnight or something. And I was starting 6th grade. Was the the grade I was going to start. And and I fell asleep on the way home, and I only lived, I guess it was 8 miles away, so it wasn't a long trip, but I fell asleep on the way home. And when I woke up, we were pulling into a parking lot, and it was daytime. And I remember looking at it and thinking, this looks like a hospital. It was like that look. And we pulled up to the front. There weren't many cars in the parking lot. It was really early. I mean, the sun was just coming up, and there was a group of people standing near the entrance in white coats and orderly looking, guys. And my mom was crying. My stepdad was silent. My brother was crying. And I had no idea what was going on, but I got out of the car, and one of the doctors told me to take the shoelaces out of my shoes, and emptied my pockets. And my mom was taking the luggage out of the car, crying, and my brother was helping her, and my younger brother, and they hugged me and then left. I was in Juliet, Illinois, is where I was at, and it was a place called Linden Oaks Hospital, and it was for children that had, I guess, traumatic experiences in life and had behavioral issues. But these kids that were in this place were, severely traumatized. I remember one girl saying that she had witnessed some kind of sacrifice in like some kind of demonic ritual, just like blowing my mind. And another kid was just like severely abused to where he spent, months in a coma, and he was my age, 10 or 11. And I knew right away I didn't belong there. I wasn't one of these, traumatized young kids, but, nevertheless, I was there. And it was a few months I was there, and they had this thing each day, like a checklist, that you had to get so many checks. And if you didn't get all the checks, then you had to sit in this, like an old schoolhouse desk, where the table and the desk is attached in the hallway of this place, and sit there all day long. They brought you your food to the desk, and you had 2 bathroom breaks. So you either went when they offered them. If you didn't have to go, then you were just SOL to the next one, And I spent the most of the time in that desk, and I couldn't understand why. I would try to get all the checks, and all these other like psycho kids were not getting put in this desk, and it was very confusing to me because I knew I wasn't I don't know, as disabled as these other kids, but for some reason they weren't sitting in the desk, and it was very confusing. And so from there I went to another one, and I think I spent up to almost my 8th grade year going to these places. It was 3 different ones. The next one was about 9 months, and the one after that was 3 months. But it was my mother's solution to my lack of discipline, because she didn't understand why I misbehaved in school. And she tried medicine. I mean, they had me on Thorazine and lithium and Prozac, and I was 11 years old, stuff they don't even consider given to people under 18 nowadays. But so this was her attempt at trying to solve my behavioral issues, which I feel like just kind of pushed me further into a life of rebellion, against the system, against the man, because she was throwing church at me and Bible verses at me, and then I was watching her do these things outside of church that I knew weren't consistent with what she was telling me in regards to the Bible verses and what these Bible verses said and what Jesus said for us to do, and she wasn't doing them. And she was, doing her own thing. And so high school was tough. That's where I kind of got into drugs, more recreationally at first. And it was weird. Most people start with, I guess, marijuana and then gradually move up, but I started with heroin. And that was the first thing that I did.
So, Jered, at some point in time, then you left these schools and then you went to high school. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the last school I went to was Shenandoah Boys Ranch in Tennessee, in Calhoun, Tennessee, and that's where I like to say I met Jesus. You know, if you were to ask me prior to August 19th, 2016, I would say that was where I was saved, because we would go to church, and then I came, at altar call, came down, and I knew I needed something, and I felt in my heart that Jesus was the answer, so I went down. But then I got kicked out of that school for exposing myself, in a joking way, and that was very embarrassing. And they kicked me out of that school, so I went straight to it was like in the middle of the school year, and that was in 9th grade. So when I left there, I went straight to the school that my family lived in, the town in Hampstead, and but yeah.
So in high school then is when you began to perhaps become dependent upon some other substances.
Yeah, I think, I got drunk a couple times, and then I think I smoked marijuana once, but it wasn't until, and I did really well in soccer. I was offered scholarships. I think my senior year, actually, I had 2 full ride scholarships, one to Temple and one partial to Maryland, and a full ride to Western Maryland, which is now McDaniel. But ended up getting kicked off the team midway through the season because I was suspended and from school, and you can't be suspended and stay on the team. So I think it was halfway through the season, and I still led our entire division in assists. So I did really well in soccer, and my girlfriend at the time became pregnant, and that all kind of happened at the same time. Lost the scholarships, and my wife became pregnant, and then a friend of mine, he's dead now, but offered me heroin in McDonald's parking lot, and I was just so whatever with life at that point that why not? And I think it was 8 months later that I injected it for the first time, because I had developed a habit snorting it, and was, I guess, short one day, and it takes a whole lot less to get high on injecting it than it does to snort it. And I was terrified of needles, but my friend that initially introduced it to me was also shooting at the time, and he said he'd do it for me. So I looked away and let him do it, and that was it. Once that drug hit with the needle, it just that's a whole nother level of drug use. So I used the heroin intravenously for almost 2 years, and then I think what kind of snapped me out of that was I got word that my brother was ashamed to admit he was my brother, and it kind of snapped me out of my drug-induced fog. And my wife, of course, had the baby, and she had been kicked out of her parents' house because of it, and so she was kind of on her own without me. So she had to depend on friends to stay with, and I wasn't really around to be supportive because I was, deep into drugs. So I felt that the solution was to join the Army, and which I did. And I was on the Greyhound bus, headed to basic training in Fort Jackson, in the bathroom of the bus with a needle in my arm, and went through withdrawals in basic training, which boot camp is hard in itself, but let alone having withdrawals of heroin to boot. I told myself I'd never do heroin again, and I stuck to that for a while. But I ended up getting kicked out of the Army a year later for cocaine use, and that was kind of like the dominoes of my life. It started with heroin, and then cocaine, and then psychedelic drugs and then pills and then crystal meth, and I would go through each drug and then say, well, that didn't work. And very abusive to my family. I mean, it was like a prison that I created for my family, because my wife just was the type of woman that was very loyal and wasn't going to leave me, no matter what happened, which I'm grateful for, but also ashamed of the pain I put her through, in that time. But so one day I realized, okay, well, I can't do drugs. I'm just going to drink alcohol. It's illegal. I'll moderate my drinking. And that worked for a little while, I guess, as far as, not getting too out of control. But it also got out of hand to where I was drinking close to a fifth a day of whiskey, and it would inebriate me to the point where I couldn't function in other ways of life as far as work and, just kind of being half productive. But I found that Adderall was helpful in not allowing that alcohol to affect you. So that being prescribed and having ADD, which was one of my many diagnoses, going through those, diagnosed bipolar and ADD and all that. So it was easy to get the prescription of Adderall, but I mean, that's an amphetamine and a drug in and of itself. So that just took my drinking to a whole new level. And my life just kind of slowly started to fall apart, where I lost my job. But I guess in regard to my faith and the main points, we've talked about wrestling with God, and I didn't realize until I sat down here and I started kind of reflecting on some things that I might talk about, and I was wrestling with God and not even really knowing that I was wrestling with God, But I remember there was times on my motorcycle where I would cuss him. I mean, I would like verbally, audibly cuss him, using every cuss I could think of. I mean, just spiting him and hating him and challenging him, on my motorcycle, just blasted out of my mind on every drug and alcohol that, was available, going 120 miles an hour, running down the yellow line, splitting cars on blind turns, and cussing God and saying, take me. You don't have the guts, you're not shit. You can't do anything to me. I'm God, And very angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at the Christian faith. I was angry at the Bible. I was angry at everything that had to do with Jesus and God. I mean, not only angry, I was hateful. I mean, I don't think I hated anything more. And I mean, I guess it might have something to do with my mom, and I don't know. I mean, psychoanalyze it all day and try to figure it out. But I guess the point of it is where my heart was at in regards to God. And I was looking for reasons to defunk him, to just make him not what he tried to, what the Bible says he was, and I would constantly try to engage in conversation with anyone that held himself in a leadership role of the church, and plug and drill him with the questions, even the questions like, like, do babies go to hell? And those that don't hear the gospel, do they go to hell? And try to trap them. And and I would stop it if I saw a message on the board of a church that I didn't agree with, that I thought was, for whatever reason, ridiculous. I would stop in and I'd hunt the pastor down or whoever was the author of the message on the sign and question them and ridicule them for how ridiculous it was. The one being a message about if you don't go to church, or basically I'm ad-libbing or paraphrasing here, but if you don't go to church, you're going to go to hell, is what this one sign said. And I was just like, I knew that wasn't true. The only thing that sends you to hell is not being a believer in Christ. That's the only reason you go to hell. So I went in looking for and they sat me down in the room and they said they'd be with me in a minute. And I think I sat there 2 hours before I realized they weren't coming back. But that was the mindset I was in regard to God. I was just constantly just in conflict with him. And the church that I eventually ended up getting baptized in, but I went and sat with him, Pastor Merv, down in Virginia, and I threw those questions at him, and I had him just like any other the pastors and priests that I sat down. I had him in the corner, and he didn't have answers for me. And of course, I thought I was winning all these discussions or debates with these religious leaders that I'd sat down with, but now looking back, realize I was just making a fool out of myself, But he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, Jered, all these questions and concerns and issues you have with God, you'll never get past them, and you'll never find peace in them until you get your heart right with God. And I was just flabbergasted. I just was like, he got me, and he really did. I mean, because that was, my heart right with God, like it's a relationship that we're having here, and it's not right, and that was I think 2014 when he said that to me, and then it just kind of quickly after that, not because of that, but it was just in that time. I think I was living with my mother with my wife, and our oldest son, and she was pregnant with Connor, and living in my mom's spare room, and I was doing some odd gutter job, putting up gutters or something, trying to pull together, but I was on Suboxone and trying to come off of that, so I was just a mess, and ended up back in Maryland, and living at a friend's house, drinking, no car. We just had a motorcycle. I was taking my wife to the grocery store on a motorcycle with my old Army duffel bag, filling that up with groceries in the winter, and then driving her back on my motorcycle because, all the money went to alcohol and Adderall and whatnot. But I ended up convincing my son to join the Air Force. Okay, so my son was about a week away from leaving for the Air Force, and he came to me with some Orioles tickets, and he had enough for the family, and he wanted me to go, and I wanted to drink. I was already kind of halfway through my drinking, and I didn't want to go because I wanted to drink. So I came up with, I got to work, I don't have time, I'm tired, and he got mad and upset and said I was a horrible dad and a drunk. And of course, in my mind, you're not going to talk to me like that in my house. But I was not even in my house. I was living in a friend's room, just the denial and the lies that you tell yourself to try to justify your behavior. But so I got angry with him and tried to throw him out of my house, and he fought back, and my wife, I don't remember, I was pretty drunk, but my wife said that I punched him a couple times, and she was holding Connor at this point. Connor had been born, and Connor was screaming and crying and saying no, and my oldest son ended up calling the police. But there in Pennsylvania, you can have a warrant put out for your arrest if you don't pay fines. As simple as a fine as a speeding ticket. If you don't pay that speeding ticket, you can have a warrant put out for your arrest. It's non-extraditable, which means they can't go to another state and get you. But if they pull you over or you encounter the police in PA and have one of these warrants, they can arrest you. And that's what happened. They arrested me. And on the way to the jail, I'd come to the end of myself, and I knew it because I could see it in my wife's eyes. I could see it in my son's eyes that was it. That was the last straw, and there had been times before, many times where, oh, that's it, but knowing, no, it's not it. I still got that time, August 18th, 2016 was, It was different. I could see it. I could see it in their eyes, and I guess that's what it's referred to, I guess, in some theological circles, of when God called me. Like he really called me at that point. Like he called my name, and I answered, and my life has changed tremendously since then. I'd given everything. It's so hard to explain what went on in that cop car, but I mean, I cried like I hadn't cried my whole life. It just like it was uncontrolled. Like it physically hurt my body of how hard I was crying, but it was a wonderful feeling at the same time. It was just an immense mix of hate and anger and love and peace and just like everything that the human body could experience.
Like cathartic, you might say.
Cathartic, that's the word, yeah. Really, that's it, yeah. And at that point, all I wanted to do was to just stay in the cocoon of the will of God, is the only way I could really put it. Is just stay within his good graces and exactly where he wants me, no matter where that is. And, I was just into the Bible while I was in jail, and I was just reading it and just, but at complete peace. I was really at complete peace and I just was really content with my life, which was so strange because, my family, from that point, my wife had to leave that house that we were in because you couldn't have the police called. My friend was renting the place, and so she ended up having to leave. And she had nowhere to go, so she had to go to Georgia, from Maryland to Georgia, to stay with my dad. My son, he never went to the Air Force. I mean, it's just like everything fell apart, but still the contentment and peace of my soul was just inexplicable. I mean, so they offered me a plea bargain to come out of jail, and I took it because I wanted to get out, Even though it was going to be on my record, I just wanted to get out and try to get my family back, and fix things. But I didn't know what I was going to do when I got out. I had no money, I had no phone, I had nothing. I didn't even have clothing. When I left the jail, I had the jail-issued sweatpants and shoes and a T-shirt, and that all issued by the jail. And I was in York, PA. So anyone I knew was an hour away. No way to call them, even if I could. So I had a plan to sleep under a bridge because it was in the evening. It was about 6:30. My plan was going to sleep under a bridge, and then I think they'd given you bus fare, but the bus had stopped running at that point. So where I could catch the bus the next morning. And I was going to try to go to like a shelter or something like that and just try to pick the pieces up. But when I walked out of the jail, my aunt and uncle, who I hadn't seen in 20 years, which was the sister of my stepdad, they were standing outside of the gate at the jail. And I broke down again when I saw it. I just couldn't believe it. But they took me to their house and asked if I had a plan, and I kind of had a vague plan of getting hooked up with a friend of mine that was a drug and alcohol counselor and getting a job and but they suggested this place, the Helping Up Mission. They said it was a year long, and that just like right away, I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. I don't have that much time. I got to get my family. So we went to Celebrate Recovery at the church that they attended, Chapelgate in Marrittsville, and afterwards sat down with a guy named Mike Rollo and a buddy of mine, Matt, and well, not at the time, but he is now, and talked about what my plan was, and they talked a little bit about the Helping Up Mission. They call the HUM, for short, but and I had no desire to do it, but I had daily devotional time with twice. Pretty much any free time I had at that point, I was in the Word and I was talking to God and I was just trying to, alleviate any kind of concerns in my life. But went back to my aunt and uncle's house and I just kind of prayed and kind of fellowship with God about what the home was about and I mean before I even walked out of the church that evening, I knew it in my heart, my gut, that that's where God wanted me to go. God, that's what He had planned for me, was to go to this Christ-based recovery center. And so I prayed about it the weekend or that night and the next day, and ended up deciding to go. Go into the Helping Out mission, which my uncle took me to that Monday morning, and that's where God just really started to show up in a major way, transform my life. I agreed to go and take part in the process of recovery that the Helping Out mission provided. And it was a 4-phase program, a year long. And the first phase was a Seed of Hope phase. This is a Christ-based program. So the first phase was a Seed of Hope phase, then the Alpha phase. The Seed of Hope phase lasted about 45 days. Then the Alpha phase was like I want to say roughly 2 months, and then the Omega phase was about 3 months, and then the last 6 months of the program was called Life Prep. So you had different privileges as you went through the phases of the program. So when I first went, I had no intention of going the entire year, none whatsoever. I had every intention not to go the entire year, but I was willing to give the first 45 days to the Helping Out mission, and I knew I needed something to kind of gather myself. So I was going to revisit my plan after what they called the blackout phase. So, which I did, and I realized pretty much right away that it wasn't time for me to leave yet. So my next plan was, that I'll just wait till the end of the Alpha phase, and then I'll probably leave then. And my uncle, of course, going through this process, he told me a couple of times about my cousin, his oldest son, going to West Point, and him going through West Point, and the way he got through it was kind of setting goals in the phases of going through West Point. Now let me get to this point, and then we'll reevaluate. So that's what I did. But I guess in the Omega phase, where things kind of started coming together, my wife was willing to entertain the possibility of giving our family another chance. So I was filled with hope, and tremendous desire to know God and the Word and the Scriptures, and I really wanted to be an example for him, because the example I had was my mother. So I kind of felt like this calling to just really be an authentic Christian for Christ. So I really had a desire to read the Scripture and understand it the best I could. So one day it just kind of hit me, why not? I've thought about going to seminary before, and there was one locally that our spiritual director of the Helping Out mission taught at as a side job. So I had gotten an email that I thought was for people that had an interest in the school, and they were you could go there and they would tell you about the school, and I guess decide whether you'd like to be a part of it. So I got permission to go, and come to find out it was actually for students already enrolled in the school. But I ended up running into the president of the school, and he just inquired to why I was there, and I told him my interest in that I had a desire to maybe attend seminary. I tried regular, I guess, secular college, and it just really wasn't for me. But he said, well, look around the school and, come up to my office when you've seen enough and we'll talk. So I did, and I went up to his office about, I guess it wasn't quite an hour later, and he sat down and said, what'd you think? I was like, well, when at that point at the home, I wasn't allowed to get a job or do anything outside the home. That wasn't until your life prep phase, and I was about a month shy of that. But you were allowed to leave the program on day passes and stuff, but you just couldn't engage in work or school or anything. So I said, well, yeah, I'd love to attend the school at some point. And he said, well, you're already enrolled and classes start next week. And I said, I didn't say anything. I wanted to say, well, I can't do that. I said, okay. And I went back to the Helping Out mission. I spoke with a spiritual director, and he pretty much said, well, it looks like God has a plan for you. So I started attending seminary school and did real well, and I enjoy it. And I'm still going, but God just kind of repaired my life, along with not just repairing it, but just embellished it with so many wonderful things, and people and in the school. And I didn't have a license. I think I was close to $6,000 broken up into many different fines that I owed Virginia and Maryland to get my license, and ended up working that out and got my license, and ended up getting a job with a company that it's a funny story, but the job that I had gotten fired from prior to being arrested, I was fired for taking a skid loader from their sister company one night drunk at the bar. They had used the bar's parking lot as a lay-down yard for some of their equipment, and I didn't have a phone. My phone had died, and I didn't have a ride, and I didn't want to call my wife because I didn't want to get in trouble. So I figured, well, I'll take the skid loader up to the local highs, get something to eat, and then bring it back. No harm, no foul. I smoked cigarettes at the time, so I figured I'd leave a couple cigarettes on the seat with maybe $5 for the trouble of fuel. Everything would be good, but I didn't even make it to the highs. The police had pulled me over. I ended up getting charged with grand theft. But that company that owned that skid loader gave me an opportunity while I was at the home. That was the first job I had at the home, was the company that owned that skid loader, and grandson. And I started working there and as an operator and going to school, but I didn't have a car, so I was biking from downtown Baltimore to Timonium, trying to catch some of the public transportation along the way to make it easier. But so I'll go to work and then catch school on the way back in. But ended up graduating the program and holding a 3.8 GPA right now at the school and finishing up the fall semester, and pretty excited about where God's taking me right now, and He's really showed up in my life in a major way, and just really excited. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Jered, that's really good. You use words like authentic. In the church today, it's a pretty cliche type of thing. Let's all be authentic. What does that mean? I mean, how does people who's hearing your story identify with that, and that, yeah, if you say these things, you check off these boxes, and this is what it makes you to be? I mean, how's that work for you?
That's kind of really hard to explain, I guess, fully, but the best way I can explain it is like a current issue I'm having, which we've discussed, is with bad language, with cussing and stuff like that. And it's not becoming of any person, let alone a Christian. When a man is standing in front of another saying, I'm a Christian, but dropping the F-bomb and talking about women in a derogatory, not talking as if they would, expect a Christian to talk. I do that. I sometimes talk like that still, but God hasn't moved in my heart in a way to where I feel like I should stop talking like that, even though I know I should. And even though I know it hurts my reputation as a Christian, I'm not going to stop talking like that just because I know I shouldn't. I really feel like for me to display, an image of an authentic Christian, I really need to believe the things in my heart that I live by, and I don't know, I guess an authentic Christian is something that in my life has been scarce because my mom has been this person, or the people that I've seen in my life going through church, they committed adultery and drank excessively and were greedy or stole. I mean, it was just so many different things and made Christianity look like a lie to me. Like, why would I even want to be that person? So I just I feel like feeling like I'm authentic in my beliefs, I can be comfortable in my walk, that I'm not going to be nervous about doing something that somebody could perceive in the wrong way. I don't have that concern, even though I know that it can be harmful, to my image as a Christian. I know that people can look at me and I assume they do. He says he's a Christian and he talks like that. But I have peace in my heart, and I know that the God's working in me, but I'm not going to set unreasonable boundaries for myself to where I feel like that I'll end up causing more damage, than I do as far as.
And I would just say that's really not the nature of how Christ works anyway. It's not like, oh, look at this one specific thing he does, I'm going to mark him for that. No, that is just, you look at the Gospels, that is opposite to how he functioned.
Right. Yeah. And
he went straight to those people.
Right. Yep. And that's why I don't know, I think that's where I feel most comfortable as a Christian and really in my progressive sanctification, I guess, as it's been put to me, really being sanctified and coming closer with Christ and not pretending like I have this real tight relationship with Christ, which, because it's real easy to learn all the right things to say, and the right ways to say them. I mean, you can see it all over TV and hear it all over the radio. There's a lot of people out there that are just magicians with the words of the Christian faith, to where they can make you think that they've been in church for a long time and he's real close to God. Do you hear that guy talk? Do you see how that guy dresses? Do you see the people he hangs out with? Do you see how he lives his life? He must be close to God. And there's some that I've met that are like that are as far away from God as anyone can be.
Those are those guys that Jesus talks about where he's like, I don't know you.
Right.
Leave me. You're lawless.
So so that's really what it comes down to. I want to know him, and I want him to know me, and I want to build a relationship with Christ and get closer to him, because there's no better place to be, just like in that cop car. There's no place I would have rather been but in that cop car. Like if I had the ability to transfer my body or transport my body somewhere else, that I would have not left that car in that moment for anything, because I was in the arms of God and in the arms of Christ, and that's where I want to be in every way in my life, even if there is a sense of rebellion, or even if I know I'm even knowingly disobeying God or disobeying what the Bible says, as far as not having foul things come out your mouth. I know that I'm not following the Bible, but by living my life, authentically in what I believe and what Christ is, I guess, convicted in my heart or imposed in my mind or whatever it may be, it brings about a confidence in myself, I guess, knowing that I'm within the will of God, but also knowing that I'm sinful and I'm imperfect, and I know God will deal with me, in His time, which I'm ready and willing,
Yeah, and time for us, it's like, we're always like, well, why isn't, this happening yet, or why isn't God doing this? But what is time to Him? It will all be in the precise moment He needs it to be.
Yeah, and Jered, if I could ask you about that cop car moment. There are people here listening to this podcast who are struggling maybe with the same things that you have, with substance abuse, with depression, with the anxiety issues. And we all hear the words that maybe if some reason you just ask Christ into your life, this all goes away. But what's it take to get to that cop car moment for people?
Well, that's a question I'm really hesitant to ask, because it's a hard truth in my mind. I mean, some people would say theologizing or whatever it may be, but in my experience, it really wasn't something that I had done. It wasn't like a decision I had made. Okay, now all right, you got me, God. Here you go. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, I felt like He had called me, like he had brought me in, like it was time. It was in His time now that I become one of His children, one of His adopted children, and I just don't believe it's something you can actually achieve. I really don't. I mean, I feel like if it was something you could achieve, that takes away from, the essence of what it is,
We hear a lot of folks say, I've been called to do this, or I've been called to do that. What the ding-dong does that mean anyway?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess people put things in words sometimes, and it just kind of becomes the easy way of saying things. But called, I guess, the conviction in your heart, something that's been on your mind, something that you can't seem to get away from, you know what I mean? And I guess when you have a relationship with Christ, and you fellowship, and you're throwing things back and forth, and you wrestle with Him and with things, then there's callings. I guess that's why I felt like He called me, because it wasn't something that, like an idea that I came up with. It was like some entity had impressed upon me this need or desire that I had no premeditated thought of. So I guess that's why I would call it called upon, because it seems to come from another source rather than your own mind or heart. So
it was just like, this, whatever I'm feeling is not me.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You were talking about earlier about your mom knew Scripture. She would use it often, and she knew the right prayers, the things to say. What makes her any different than you?
I mean, there really isn't a difference, between me and her. I mean, the only difference is that, she was what impressed my life. She was my first experience with a church, and with the Scripture, and with Christ, and with God. That's where my first experience came from. So, her being, so hypocritical in the way she lived and the way she talked, and it just being a complete contradiction, it just put a bad image in my mind, or a bad, opinion towards Christianity, which I feel like is what happens a lot. You know what I mean? And I'm sure there's a chance that I might do that to someone else, even my own son. So there really isn't anything different. Which I feel like that realization also came from the forgiveness that God had blessed me with in my mom. Because there was years where I'd say, I forgive you, Mom, I forgive you, Mom. She would say, oh, I'm so sorry for this, I'm so sorry for that, I'm so sorry I sent you to this place, and I forgive you, Mom, I love you. but I never really did in my heart, you know. And in this process, these past couple of years, I came to a point where I truly had found forgiveness from my mother. And I remember, I don't know the date, but I remember the exact moment because we were going over in class, one of the classes at the home. They had a lot of these classes that, you know, kind of therapeutical classes, and it was 7 adverse things that could happen to a child in their life that would cause them to be dysfunctional or, you know, have behavioral issues or get into drugs and alcohol. And as they went through the 7 things, they wanted us to kind of like take note of which ones we had experienced. And I think I'd experienced like 4 of them, 4 out of the 7. And as I sat there, I just kind of like, well, I wonder what my son has gone through, you know. And as I sat there and looked at him and realized that he had gone through every single one of them, that I had put my son through all 7, you know, and had thought that I had been a better parent than my mother up until that point, you know. So the realization that my mom did love me, you know, because I guess the things that she did and choices she made that affected my life made me feel like she didn't love me. And I felt unloved, which I'm sure contributed to my delinquency. But in that moment, I realized that because I love my son more than anything, but I had done worse things to him than my mother had done to me, and I felt like I was a better parent than her at that point. So then that it was just like an overwhelming, forgiveness, you know. It's just what it was, you know, just love for my mom and understanding and empathy for what she is going through, you know, because I think she truly wants peace in her heart, but she can't find it still to this day. And it's hard to see her go through that.
Yeah, it kind of what you were saying there about forgiving your mom reminds me of something I once heard, that when we breathe in the pneuma, which is a word meaning spirit, literally translating the Spirit of God, we also realize everything we need to breathe out.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. That's true.
So what would you say to those folks who are listening to this, who probably in your story somewhere is their story? You know, we can't just wave the Christian magic wand and all of a sudden everybody's happy again and everything's over with and they're all a whole lot better than they were before.
That's BS.
It is. And so what's it going to take? What's it going to take, you know, for them to have a chance of healing, a chance of a real walk with Christ? And how does this all come together? What do you have to say to them about that?
Well, I mean, to stay consistent with kind of what I've said so far, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's a hard truth. But this is just how I feel. I mean, I really feel like that there really isn't anything that someone could do. You know, I don't think it's not an achievement. It's not like, okay, if you do this or do that, then you'll be saved. Even though, you know, it's just it's in God's time, I guess, and that's the sad truth of it. I feel like, you know, that, which is why, I mean, when I realized that, I felt like I was willing to give up my salvation for my son. You know, that the possibility of my children not being saved, you know, that really being a legitimate possibility, no matter what I did, no matter how I raised them, no matter if they were in church, you know, nothing really mattered, because there was a real possibility of them not being saved no matter what. And I really truly realized I would give my salvation up for that. And in that realization, I like rethought heaven and hell as a whole. If I'm willing to give up my salvation and go to hell so that my son can, and I know that's not possible, I can't do that, you know what I mean? So which I found, a desire, more motivation to be an authentic Christian, and really get into this. If I can't give this to my son, then I'm going to treat it with the utmost respect and give it my all to glorify God. But I realized that there was a part of me, and really not a part of me, that I didn't care if I went to heaven. I don't currently, and that shocks a lot of people. And when I say I don't care, I say it in the sense that if I knew I didn't go to heaven right now, that would not change how I live my life for Christ. That regardless if I go to heaven or hell, that my life is going to be lived for Christ because of what he's already done for me in this life, and I'm just so grateful for what he's done in my life, and grateful to be one of the chosen, that I just feel like that I need to just give this my genuine all-out effort in pursuit of, progressive sanctification. I just love those two words, progressive.
When I hear that, though, Jered, I think kind of what we were talking a little bit about off microphone in between the show here, let me bring that up, is to you, though, like we were saying about heaven and hell, to you, heaven is only where he is. And any other supposed benefit, like, what you hear in myths and fables about golden streets or this, that, or the other, is just all nothing. It's just, it's otherwise garbage if he's not there.
Right.
I had once heard that someone had said, I'd rather be in the environment of hell if Jesus was there than in the environment of heaven with all of its splendor if he wasn't. Right. And at the end of the day, that is the only difference. Do you want to be in the presence of the eternal God, of Jesus, or not?
Right.
Because maybe my heaven is someone who doesn't. Maybe that's their hell.
Right. Yeah. See, and that was one of the big issues I had with Christianity, too, was the whole hellfire and brimstone approach to some of the preaching, scaring people into Christianity, with the burning in hell, and it never sat right with me, and it still doesn't. I don't really agree with that way of approaching, evangelism and preaching and bringing, which is why it's a nice, thing to ponder, sitting in the hot tub smoking a cigar, to ponder those kind of theological, wonders, of what heaven may be like, but it has no impact on my day-to-day choices. I don't do or choose or embark on the things of my life based off of where I go when I die. Not saying that's not important. It's very important, to, I guess, the afterlife, but currently in my life, it doesn't hold as near as much weight as being kind to someone when I don't want to be. That to me deserves more of my attention than whether or not there is a heaven, or whether I'm going there, or what it's like. It just, I feel like a lot of time is wasted on that thought, and not enough time is focused on how we treat each other, or how we perpetuate the division of the body of Christ in our different doctrine. It just, there's so many more important things to focus on.
So what would you say to that person like yourself some years back who maybe just before that cop car moment is thinking right now, I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end, or I'm getting close to that place, and this whole Christian thing, I don't know. I hear a lot of good things, but, it's just not working for me.
Well, the only thing I could say was the thing that was said to me that was most impactful, and I said it, earlier, that until you get your heart right with God, you will never be at rest. And that's not, it kind of implies like you have, some control over that, I guess it'd be better put until your heart is right with God. Not necessarily until you get your heart right with God, but until your heart is right with God, you will be restless.
I would say it implies, though, a genuine openness of heart. Maybe you don't really know what you're going for here, but you're ready to listen to whatever might show up.
Right. And that's why those words from Pastor Merv were so impactful. And they weren't as impactful at the time, but it was more impactful in retrospect, looking back and how he just kind of defunct all of my issues to where I sat him down and realized, okay, well, I'm fighting a losing battle here because he got me there. I'm never going to get the answers I want until my heart is right with God, because they're, But yeah, that's the paradox of it all, I guess.
So how would you say your wife and your family, perhaps even your in-laws, going forward, what do they think about you now?
Well, my sister-in-law jokes. She jokes around, and I guess because my wife's parents weren't too fond of me at the initial start of our relationship 20 years ago. When my wife got pregnant with our first son in high school, they, that thus began their hatred for me. They gave me a chance in between those 20 years, and I screwed that up about 10 years ago. So, I haven't spoken to them or been allowed in their house in 10 years. So, but my wife's sister, their youngest daughter, told them that Jenny, my wife, had gotten a divorce and remarried. And that's how she describes what's happened, but with me and our family, that I'm not just transformed, but just a completely different person, that I'm not the same man I was, even look like. She says I don't even look the same, that there's a light, I guess, which is, it's great to hear, and it's just reassuring,
But they realize it's the same flesh and blood from some years back. But that's a great way to put it. I really like that.
Yeah, so hopefully I'm praying that maybe they'll invite me over for Christmas this year. Not necessarily for me by any means. I really wouldn't. If they don't accept me or not, it's really not any bearing, I guess, on me, but I know it would mean a lot to my wife, and at this point, that's a very close second to being an authentic and genuine Christian, as being a loving father and husband. That's just really all I really want to do at this point.
Jered, we want to thank you so much for being a part of this tonight. It's just in your story there's hope, and it's just an incredible story. We want to thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was our pleasure, Jered. Absolutely.
And thank you for listening in on our first episode of Restless, the podcast. If you'd like to be on the show, email us at info@restlesspodcast.com or go to our website, restlesspodcast.com, and go to the drop-down little menu tab there that says Tell Your Story and leave your information. And we'll be excited about getting back with you.
For those of us here at Restless, the podcast, much like the restless waves churning in the ocean, longing to find rest on a shore, we are restless for the one who said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. But for you, for whom is your heart restless?"